Welcome to another meeting of Book Club. Today we're going to talk about Working Through Peace, the 1969 through 1975 years of learning to love by Sean Kong. We're going to be working through chapters 13 through 16 today. I'm sure I already know the answer, but who read the book?
I can't read.
Yay.
I can read, but I haven't done any reading recently.
That's okay. There are some super good chunks of these chapters, but it is very heavy with history this time around. This chunk of chapters feels very factual, and lots of dates are mentioned and very specific events. So immediately, we're brought one with like 1969 here, 1968, 1973. I am once again presented with the words Peace Accords of 1973, which I haven't even seen as a phrase since 10th grade history class. So it's just really interesting. How much history? I don't know. What about you guys?
I don't know nothing about history ever.
Cool beans. Once again, I'll give a slight caveat. There will be mentions of self-inflicted bad times later in this chapter, and then also there's lots of violence and death, and this is a very heavy book. So just once again, just some warning ahead of time. If you're sensitive to those subjects, maybe don't listen.
Par for the course for history.
It can be. It's absolutely par for the course with history, Ben. I have to agree with you on that. Definitely. All right. So we get some history on this page, and then some people didn't let them have a conference, so they'll have a conference but not a press conference. Blah blah blah. I'm gonna begin gathering the monks. President invited Buddhist temple drums, bells. There's like a whole meeting going on. I don't think we need to go through like event per event. But what Sean Kong presents to us is a prayer of peace, prayer for peace that they did at this meeting. I thought was very, very beautiful. And I'm gonna read it, I guess, out loud, whatever. In beauty, sitting on a lotus flower, is the Lord Buddha, quiet and solid. Your humble disciple, calm and pure of heart, forms a lotus flower with his two hands, faces you with deep respect, and offers this heartfelt prayer. Homage to all Buddhas in the 10 directions. Please have compassion for our suffering. Our land has been at war for 2 decades. Divided, it is a land of tears, and blood and bones of young and old. Mothers weep till their tears are dry, while their sons on distant fields decay. Its beauty torn apart, only blood and tears now flow, brothers killing brothers for promises from outside. Homage to all Buddhas in the 10 directions. Because of your love for all people, have compassion on us. Help us remember we are just one family, north and south. Help us rekindle our compassion and brotherhood and transform our separate interests into loving acceptance for all. May your compassion help us forget our hatred. I don't know how to say that word. Bodhisattva's love help flowers bloom again in the soil of our country. Humbly, we open our hearts to you so you may help us transform our deeds and water the flowers of our spirits. With our deep understanding, help our hearts grow light. Homage to Shakyamuni. Do you know how to say that, Max? Or Ben?
Let me
Yeah,
open the thing here.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I thought it was a cute prayer. Cute. It is a beautiful prayer.
Yes,
I often envy. So when I read translations of poetry, I get kind of a sense of I don't know, melancholy for not speaking that language, and so I can't like go read it in its original format to see what kind of rhyme structure would have actually come out of it and how that might have felt from reading from the natively spoken words. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Poetry is hard to translate in a way that's still getting across what it's trying to say.
Right.
But when it's done well, it's all the more amazing.
Yeah.
I could give an example, but that's a little off topic, so maybe we should continue.
That's so the book club, you know, if you have something you feel like is even tangentially relevant, you're welcome to talk about it. I try not to be like, we are definitely talking through the entire chapter. Like, it's not really what it's about.
To this topic.
What you say, Ben?
What I had in mind has nothing to do with this topic or Buddhism in general. So yeah, let's just continue.
Okay. If you feel like it's worth discussion, just throw it in a channel. You can type it out real quick, and then maybe we can talk about it later. Yeah. So I thought it was very beautiful, and then they start on this a lot of work with the. Okay, sorry. I'm getting some of the chapters jumbled in my brain.
Dang it, Des.
I thought it was cool that they published their newsletters in English, French, and Vietnamese. So they were hitting like a lot of audience. I thought that was very interesting. Mostly what I think felt the most difficult was just how much the government was making their lives hard for doing social work like this. They're just trying to help people, and then over and over again, the government presents them with such difficult hardships. Oh, and then
The Vietnamese government.
yeah, well, the Vietnamese government, but the communist government, right, that was taking over at the time. 24 brand new hours was also very sweet, and definitely worth a read. If you have time. But so just throughout all this, she's like raising money, like their group is raising money and trying to meet the needs of people. And then at some point, I'm gonna get a little jump around here, but at some point, the government in the communist government instates this rule, I guess, that their organizations have to submit the funding to the government first before it gets redistributed for the work it was intended for. And so at some point, their group that she's a part of gathers like $150,000, which back in not only in 1970s but like in Vietnam, that's a lot of money. And
yeah.
So they collect it, they give it to the government gives them a receipt, says, yes, we've received this money, it's going to be used for this. She's excited, and then that money never gets redistributed for the purpose it was meant for, which was to assist and feed orphans and widows of the community. And I found that incredibly frustrating, and just to like go through her story and realize how much I don't know, just their group, not just her, but like just their group was put through and to persevere and just keep going, because you know the work you're doing is important, it's good, and you just keep going even though you're just constantly being pushed down in a way that would make a lot of people stop. That was interesting.
Perseverance, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Perseverance.
Not, that's how they say it.
Yeah. Obviously, when possible, the Unified Buddhist Church wanted like nonviolent approaches, and I don't know. So this is for me, it's a hard chapter to talk about. I don't know what to say other than this is a lot of facts, and I honestly recommend this book if you're interested in getting a first-hand account of what was going on. I find history very interesting, but I feel like I was taught it very poorly. In 1966, I think. No, what year is it? So anyway, at some point in her journey, she's like, I gotta learn English. She definitely said it in that hick accent as well. And then, so we go through, there we go. I thought it was interesting, this idea of learning the skill necessary. Oops, I didn't mean to highlight that. Oh, wow. So, learning the skills necessary to communicate the message you need to. They told me that I would be able to communicate the situation of the war much more clearly and effectively if I spoke to people directly and not through a translator. And so this idea of learning the tools you need to do the job you want to do, right? And so I thought that was interesting. You guys are welcome to talk anytime. I'm just gonna...
No.
No.
You must continue to prattle on.
I'm just gonna prattle the whole time about...
This is called Prattle Time with Des.
Prattle Time with Des. Everybody's favorite time to do things.
See? You're very good at it.
So she has difficulties with... She has ups and downs with her English learning, but it sounds like ultimately very glad she learned it. It was very useful as she goes forward into her journey of outreach, social work, and just the work of trying to get the world to see, like, y'all need to stop. This needs to stop. This is bad. And just, sorry, I laugh when I'm nervous just so everybody knows. It's not that I necessarily find anything particularly funny.
Oh, I thought you were just, sociopath and you enjoyed the suffering of others.
Yeah. No.
As a good Buddhist should.
Yes, as a good Buddhist, I actually find great joy in the suffering of others. No.
I think you may have misunderstood something there.
Yeah. I might have to go over my notes again. Figure out how to not be a terrible human being like Max suggested.
Yes, don't listen to me.
Not just a Buddhist, but just a bad person. Like...
Right.
So lots of history is happening here. We find a lot of inner relationships, her dealings with like the Dutch Minister of Foreign Affairs. She meets with the Christian groups to discuss a lot of such things. Very heavy in history. I spoke to as many groups as I could, and I spoke to each with all my heart. So at this stage, at this part of the chapter, I think she's doing like 8 lectures a day.
Damn.
Uh-huh. And then working for the day when all the children of the world would be able to sing and play in peace. Like, she has such a clear goal in her mind. And I really admire her very steadfast and patient work towards that goal. You know?
It's a good goal.
Good goal. Good work, yo.
Yeah. Good drive.
Yeah. I envy that work ethic. It's really good. And we only wanted immediate. Huh. So some of the peace activists, they start to butt heads here because some of them are like, "Oh, we're gonna win," and she's like, "Nobody wins. Just stop. We just need to stop killing everybody and fighting. Nobody has to win." Let's see. Oh, yes. With many of them, as with representatives of the State Department, I had the impression I was speaking to a wall. I cried often and felt completely frustrated. Then I remembered the Buddhist teaching that knowledge can be an obstacle to understanding. Very true.
That's okay. This is where I will chime in, because that's a good fucking line.
Mm-hmm.
it's so hard in the West especially to understand that knowledge isn't actually as useful as we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, she was going over this, or going through this rather, seeing firsthand all of her efforts get sort of rebuked at every turn outside of her organization, whether it's the government, other protesters, like it doesn't matter. There's just always someone saying, I'm going to make this harder for you.
Yeah.
And she knew that, and she knew it wasn't going to stop. And like, I think that insight of knowing, quote unquote, all of these things is just expectations in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you, I mean, we can't help but notice and expect patterns of behavior, right?
Right.
So if you're getting rebuffed left and right over and over, and you go somewhere else and it still happens, like you come to the conclusion, oh, this is just how it is. This is just going to keep happening.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that might be right, but it's not helpful.
Right.
You know,
It's not.
So I think we have too much emphasis on knowledge, and not so much on what's a good word for it? I don't even know.
Learning, perhaps. I mean, the more you know, the less you perhaps, or the more you are tempted to think you don't have to learn anything anymore.
Well, and so
that's true.
Yeah. And so this example that she's giving of this exact thing is that the U.S. peace workers wouldn't even listen to her because they were so set in that they know what's going on. They know what's happening. And it's the same idea of like being stuck in like, I already know the answer, right? Like I know the end result, or I know. Yeah, it's that attachment to assurance to not assurance. It's what's the word I'm looking for?
Intellectualism.
Certainty.
Yeah. It's an attachment to a form of certainty that doesn't make sense, especially when you're being presented with alternative realms of thought from somebody who's either closer to the problem or more informed than you are, right? But you continue to be more informed. Like you continue to feel more certain that you already know. You know.
This reminds me very much of the concept of beginner's mind.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, and in the master's mind, there are few.
Yeah.
And if you presume to know what's happening, despite this person who is clearly living the situation and you've just heard it secondhand at best,
yeah,
you have become attached to your idea, and you're not even, it's not even a willingness at this point, it's an inability to listen to anything else because you already know. Why would you listen?
Right. So frustrating.
Zen mind beginners. Zen mind beginners.
Absolutely. Then what happened, Dad?
She spends a lot of time in Washington, and like near Washington, and just generally in the United States. I was gonna say the Americas, but I don't think she went to Canada or Mexico. So she's in the United States, just really trying to work with these peace worker groups to push them to actually get something done and to speak more, because you have to, at this stage during the Vietnam War, she has to, the task at hand seems to be changing the minds of an entire population, right?
Yeah.
It's not just the minds of the few. The entire, like, what do they call it when it's the big brain of a society? There's a word for that. The zeitgeist?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the zeitgeist. She has to sway that, not just the individual, which is a much more insurmountable task.
There's so much more, like, inertia there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start stepping up in terms of the scale you're working with, like an individual, all right, you could probably change an individual's mind if you're lucky.
Yeah. Is it difficult? Sure.
It's difficult. Just for one person, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And then you scale it up to like a small community. Well, maybe if you're passionate and you have the right timing or circumstances,
right,
maybe you could do that. But anything bigger than that, you approaching it as an individual is almost laughable because it's just so difficult.
Yeah.
And yet she continued.
I think time and time again, yeah. So time and time again, she is faced with the opportunity that she can. She is, I think, obviously a person capable of swaying hearts. It does seem that she's time again presented with like very stubborn individuals, and those individuals will often change their mind. But it's the bigger like machine that isn't being moved, you know. And I can't imagine how absolutely frustrating that is. And then just still keep going. And still keep working on it. They start some campaigns. 9,000 signatures from government leaders and clergy from 22 countries. 500 parliament members, congressmen, and senators signed to support the campaign of Stop the Killing Now. And present, I guess, what did they do with it? I can't remember if they gave it to the... Anyway, there's like a lot of conflicts going on, and they keep like overlapping other distracting events with their events. I say they, and I mean the powers that be. I'm not really sure who they are.
The Illuminati?
The Illuminati continue to really just hate Buddhism and everything
There
they're
we go.
about.
We've cracked the code.
Mm-hmm.
You did it, Des. We can't publish this on YouTube. They're going to come for us.
Oh, no!
Oh, no!
Oh, no! But I made all those cool, you can't see this screen, actually. I was like, but I made this cool little Buddha face, but you can't see that. I'm not sharing that screen.
Secret Buddha face. Secret Buddha face.
Anyway, unimportant. Yeah, so lots of, I'm going to call it schmoozing, but that would like, I don't want to deny the importance of what she's doing. I just don't have another networking. Networking is the word I'm looking for. Does a ton of networking. Tons of networking here and there, all over the place. And just really works everything. But man, it just gets rough. Everything is so bad. And I don't want to just sit here and list the travesties, right? Because honestly, if you want to list the travesties, just read this book and then get sad. Be sad for a bit.
Right.
And then there you go. Fast sadness on a plate for you. Chapter 15. Children suffer equally. Weird thought. Max, do you feel like people underestimate the suffering of children?
For sure. Children are more often than not treated as objects than people.
Mm-hmm.
And when they are considered as people, they're considered as half people or immature people. They struggle to have any sort of recognition as a fully functioning consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So if a child is struggling or whatever, outside of this child's parents or, direct teachers, no one will be fucked to, like, give any concern at all unless, I don't know, the child's bleeding or something. If it's obvious, maybe someone will do something. But if the kid says, like, I'm scared, okay, well, you're a child. Of course you're scared. I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't put the same weight on it. So she discusses the tradition of what to do with orphans when that occurs in Vietnam. And then talks about some of their daycare centers run by the Buddhists. Lots of translating happens. Here's some orphans. You can look at their picture here. I am
Hooray, orphans.
So I've been forbidden by my partner to look at the adoption websites online.
I understand why you've been forbidden. that is for the best.
I will start crying and then be like, they need a vet. Let's go adopt them. And Gregory's like, we can't adopt all of the orphans. I'm like, why not? They need me. I think that goes back to some of our discussions we've had before, Max, about, I say Max, Ben's here too. I just can't remember if Ben was in those discussions or not. We discussed a lot about, and it's come up in this book even, of there's a level of work you do and there's a level of sacrifice you don't do. Because if you go past that line of sacrifice, you become like certain of only one thing, and then that's that you've become someone else's burden, or that you're not there to help,
This reminds me of in psychology, there's a bell curve for mental readiness and mental action, and even just consciousness itself, that says if you go too far to either way, it doesn't work. But if you sit right in the middle, in that sweet spot, it'll be fine. And I think that's also true of this kind of a thing. If you don't give anything, well, then you're not helping at all. And if you give everything, well, now you need help. But if you give just the right amount, you don't need help and you're helping.
Right. Excuse me. I have the hiccups. Right, so you got to find that sweet spot. Absolutely. I agree. She also discusses how the church, like, she's able to connect with the Christian church about their experiences as Buddhists, and they're like bridging this gap, and I thought that was kind of cool. And then lots of talking and blah blah blah. I invited him to be inside the skin of a young person growing up in our war-torn country. What an invitation. So we have lots of history, lots of discussion, lots of networking. Then some hypothetical questions that, even though I have been reading this book, I still don't get the full context for. I would have to... So, ultimately, as much as I love reading and discussing things, I'm a visual learner, so I would have to literally sit down and make some charts and, like, draw out maps of stuff to fully integrate this whole situation into my brain.
Well, why don't you?
Laziness.
Ah, yes. One of the hindrances.
I also have to okay, so tangent. I also have to sit back and reflect on the utility of doing that ultimately. Like, sure, it would help me in this moment of reading the book, but in the long term, is that a good use of my time? Will that
Probably not.
further my practice? Will it further my goals even, or other non-practice related goals? And so those are just things that I kind of weigh when making those decisions of like, I could understand this perfectly, but is that a good use of my time? Which then leads me on another tangent in my mind about perfectionism and how perfectionism has stopped many people from excelling because they believe they have to get it 100% correct instead of just accepting that 80% is good enough.
Final 20% will take 80% of it.
Exactly.
If you can get it.
So you have these dual mindsets, right? Like that anything worth doing is worth doing well, or anything worth doing is worth doing half-assed.
Anything worth doing is worth doing.
Right, exactly. So that's where that is, right? Like it's better to have done it half like most of the way than to have not done it because you couldn't do it perfectly.
Right. Get part of the way there, and then come back to it later, and then try again to get the rest of the way, rather than sitting at the starting line saying, well, I can't see the finish, so I might as well not start yet.
But this also conflicts with like a way of thinking, which is that if you don't have time to do it right the first time, when are you going to have time to do it again?
Right.
So it's just, there's a lot to balance, right? You got to find that middle path, that middle way, right? We come back to this again and again. There's a middle way we got to get to. Can't just live in extremes, yo. Anyway, there you go. What, Ben?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing.
Like, yeah. I do that sometimes when people are talking and I just agree and I have nothing to add. I'm just like, yeah. Then there's more networking and discussions and singing is talked about. And she reflects on the sadness of the war affecting ordinary people and their lives, and just like how disruptive it is to a peaceful existence. And discusses this super fancy muck. I've overheard lots of negotiations about some money and then numbers. And then chapter 16. Okay. We did not have the chance to build another resettlement center because after the war ended on April 30th, 1975, the communist government took all the money in the bank account of the Committee for Reconstruction and Development of the UBC, including $175,000, which is like 3 months of support for 9,746 orphans, 2 days before the end of the war, and stopped all of the work. So this is what I was talking about, actually. This is where I jumped around earlier, was that the funding for their work with the orphans had been like pulled by the by this government entity, and then they had to like jump through a bunch of hoops trying to get it back because they needed the funding to do the work. And the funding, their donors and their sponsors were there, but the money had been removed by an arbitrary third party. And then Sean really kind of opens up a bit about having just really, it sounds like diving into a bit of depression where she just no joy or energy for life. She thinks of Vietnam and wants to die or to sleep and never wake up. Super depressed. And I'm glad that this book includes these moments, right? Because I think it's easy to put these well-known, well-respected teachers on pedestals and to assume that they're never afflicted with human things, right? Oh man, she's always at peace. Oh man, she's always doing this. Well, sometimes you get your human brain in the way and you get depressed or anxious or sad. And I like that the book doesn't omit that humanity.
I mean, I think it's important, yeah, to keep that in there so that you can have some perspective that even the greatest of Buddhist masters are still just human beings with flaws.
Yeah. I think some other teaching, some other like religions that you can walk through often make their spiritual leaders feel very untouchable and
Otherworldly, even.
otherworldly. Thank you. I was like, what is the word? Yeah, otherworldly, right? And they just don't feel human. And what I have really appreciated walking this path is that most teachers feel very human. They feel very riddled with their flaws, but doing their best.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, anyway, just as a stopping note, I appreciate that's there. So she doubts the sincerity of the communists. They continue to urge me to send their money to Vietnam directly via the embassy. This is what I talked about earlier, blah blah blah. Makes 300 copies of this receipt from the government stating what that the money was received and what it's going to be used for. Lo and behold, nobody does anything with it. It just disappears. The money's gone. And then she just talks about having to, walk, garden, cook, and remain aware of each breath because sometimes trying to touch on the thoughts of what's going on was just too painful and too desperate. So, just a very real human thing is happening to Shang Kong during this chapter. And I found that very moving, but also sad. Because, I don't know, it's interesting to be, like, led up to 15 chapters of this incredibly strong, resilient person, and then this is when they're finally sad and just overwhelmed, and... Anyway. They did some stuff. They did some meditating. They hung out with some friends.
Nice.
They continues to give. Huh?
I said nice.
Nice. Then they start harvesting sweet potatoes. And they started... Our life in the sweet potato community was meditative and joyful. We did not feel strong enough to sing traditional Vietnamese songs, but we sang songs that arose from our meditations. So they're still like reflecting with a lot of sadness about Vietnam, but are finding new ways to find joy. They wrote some sad poetry. Here's some of it. It's called Always the Same Mind. And so that's sweet. You should read that sometime. Life at Sweet Potato Community was beautiful, but I still felt forlorn.
God, I hope she has that accent.
I don't think so, since English is like her third language.
Maybe she was taught English by someone from the Deep South.
She was taught English from earlier chapters of this exact segment that we're talking about. She learned it from a newspaper.
Oh, shit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was a newspaper from the Deep South.
Mm.
The newspaper had the accent.
Right.
So she gets really depressed as her return to France, in that, like, she doesn't feel like she's really helping, right? She's very, this isn't interesting to me, right? She's very attached to this narrative of being somebody who has helped. And so she enters a bit of a depression when all she has time for is meditation and planting and gardening, right? And so this becomes a source of sadness for her. But then she has this insight: because I was born in Vietnam, I knew the language, culture, and moral values of Vietnam. I was an expert in that part of the world, but I had to devote all my energies to finding ways to help it. That was interesting. I don't know what that means in relation to everything else that's going on, but there you are. So then later she remembers the medicine you sent, mother, blah, blah, blah. If I
mean,
could...
she knows how to get around the fucking red tape.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I began sending parcels of medicine to social workers we had worked with in the past. That's nice. So she begins feeling helpful because, like, at this stage, she's still not really allowed in the country. She's not allowed in Vietnam for a lot of reasons. And so in order to feel helpful, she's beginning to figure out, oh, I can send medicine, which, that's really good. In this way, I began to accumulate a list of the poorest families through the communications with the people that she'd worked with and blah, blah, blah. She taught children things. And then all sorts of stuff happens, lots of history. She reflects on some sad times. Somebody died, like, with 600 pieces of grenade in their body, and they lost a leg. Anyway, it's very sad. Oh, it was I think it was her sister who died. I think, maybe. I am trying really hard to keep up with all the names, but it is not it's not the easiest for me. I think Huang is her sister, and she died very tragically. And that's the end of the segments that we had scheduled for this week. Do you have any amazing insights for us, Captain Silent Gong Buddha Max?
Nah.
Ben, any special insights you might have had about the chapters?
No.
All right, go team.
Well, okay. So I do enjoy how when she was at the sweet potato, what was it?
Sweet potato was like just community, yeah.
Okay.
So an entire community around sweet potatoes.
That she was using meditation as a way to not sink into, depression.
Mm-hmm.
And that after a few months, she had that insight. And I think, I feel like there's a belief that the insights we gain from meditation come after we've, achieved some sort of quasi-inner peace.
Right.
Or have made some sort of quote-unquote progress.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just meditating to not kill herself, to not fall into this deep depression. And even in the midst of that, she has this insight of, like, oh, I know how to get around the system. I could send them medical supplies rather than money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just it strikes me as beautiful that no matter your circumstance, no matter your psychological well-being, you can still, through meditation, come up with connections that help you without you actually thinking about how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that just speaks to me about how the utility of meditation, beyond just, oh, I feel better now,
Yeah.
you know.
I agree. Yeah.